It's
Welcome to the future indeed, folks. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh, for the only coast-to-coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. We have a great guest lined up for you today, a couple great guests. We're going to talk about something that affects all of us in the consumer world. We all want cool products. We all want nice clothes. We all want really cool stuff from our retailers. And today we're going to be talking to Eric Linxwiler. He's from a company called Trade Beyond. They've been around for about 11 years, but they're putting the pedal to the metal now, getting the word out about what they're doing. And it's really interesting stuff, folks, because supply chains, as many of you know, can be pretty tricky, can be pretty complex. We just saw what happened because of COVID. And even before COVID, we saw the tariffs on China from a previous administration. That was kind of the straw in the wind, if you will, to say that, hey, things might get a little interesting here for getting your products that you want. And I'm a big fan of how clear and candid country music lyrics can be. And there's a great song that said, if you bought it, a big truck brought it. And if you want it, a big truck's on it. Right. So they're telling you that the truckers are getting that last mile, getting it to your retailer. But there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And we're going to talk today with Mr. Linxwiler and my buddy Eugene Burke about some up-to-date supply chain technology. So if you are a producer, if you want to get your products white labeled, and then in places like Target or Walmart or other places like that, these are the folks you want to talk to. Trade Beyond. That's their expertise. It's their specialty. And like I said, we all want cool stuff. Everyone wants cool stuff. The girls all want their unique clothing. They want some style. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I know all about that. We're going around and around in the Halloween costume right now, and it's a little bit stressful, but I'm sure we'll get there in time for the trick-or-treating. But with that, without further ado, let's hear from Eric Linxwiler from Trade Beyond. Tell us a bit about what you folks are doing and how you are enabling a whole new generation of producers to get their stuff to market.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate the time today, and honored to be here on your air with you. And yeah, Trade Beyond, I think we are at a extremely exciting time when it comes to retail supply chain, the streamlining, the compression of time to market for, as you mentioned, valuable private label and exclusive branded product. We focus exclusively on tier one retailers and brands and their supply chain and their makers of their products, and helping them to deliver products faster at the right price point, certainly at the highest levels of quality, while also adhering to environmental and social governance across the board, as it's now being pushed quite heavily.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting part of the equation, right? Right there is the regulations, the rules, the policies. For small suppliers to keep track of that is basically impossible. So you need a partner who's going to manage that part of the process for you and then just deliver it as a service, right? Do you want to talk about how that is one of the key offerings that you bring to the table to help people navigate that world without having to hire lawyers and policy experts, which, let's face it, smaller producers just can't do? What do you think?
Yeah, that's right. And whether you don't really have to categorize it as a smaller producer, a medium, or a large. The problem, the challenge, I should say, is really equal across the entire landscape, and that is that the supply chain partners at every level, we call them tiers in our business, from the initial tier one supplier that receives a purchase order, to his or her partners that are producing fixed goods, that are then buying raw materials from other providers, and maybe even buying raw material, cotton as an example, from a farmer. The challenge that these folks didn't have to meet in the past, that they're now being legislated globally to meet, is to be able to create a digital chain of custody, or a document that shows where each step in the process, each stop in the chain was executed, and be able to produce that on demand. Whether you're, again, the largest supplier or the smallest, this is tricky business. And this is something that we do reasonably well. We're getting better. We're incorporating artificial intelligence, generative AI, machine learning into the process. and working with a lot of partners around the world to streamline this effort for the entire supply chain community.
Yeah, and let's just go through the component parts real quick, and then we'll get Eugene into the conversation here. You enable ideation, like so from the very start of trying to come up with some new product or service, and then you have some technology that walks through that whole process. Could you just quickly walk through what does the process look like? I am a small, mid-size, maybe even a large distributor or creator of products, and I want to get into some new channels. What does that look like from my perspective?
Yeah, for sure. So inside of Trade Beyond the organization, we have a platform, we call it CBX. And within CBX, you have multiple modules which string together a full set of critical path activities that help the supplier and the retailer or the brand team up and collaborate on a specification for a product, dimensions, product materials, price point, etc., and then move that specification through a quoting, a solicitation, a sample management, sample evaluation exercise on through to production, tracking quality inspections, etc., until ultimately you move that product into a carton and put the carton onto a container. So the platform CBX helps manage that entire critical path for all players in the supply chain.
Yeah, that's amazing. And let's talk about that partner ecosystem and two questions really. One, the partner ecosystem, talk a bit about that. But two, you talk about like sources, like materials to be used. I mean, how comprehensive is that environment? Could I go in there and design t-shirts or could I design other kinds of clothing? What can I actually do?
Oh, it's across the full gamut of merchandise, from apparel and footwear, from the simplest T-shirts, 100% cotton, to the most complex totes or purses. Rather hardline merchandise. I mean, like these headphones I'm wearing, electronics, over to general merchandise that you buy at your local, that's your local health and beauty store. So the single platform is built to serve all product assortments, all categories.
That's outstanding. I mean, just the repository of parts and fabrics and different things like that you have access to strikes me as being a service offering in and of itself, right? To be able to go into this environment and see what's available and how real time is that? That's always one of the real issues with supply chain is knowing how many widgets do you have left? How many bolts do you have left? What kind of visibility do you get across that environment?
Yeah, well, that's really what people are really striving to achieve: real-time visibility and capacity to produce. Those are two things:
Mm-hmm.
real-time visibility of the componentry, but also the ability to get it out on time. Both the supply chain partners and the buyers, who are the brands and retailers, they're on a single platform and they're communicating and collaborating digitally through real-time messaging tools, whether it be through a vehicle like this with us video conferencing, or even just texting back and forth, sending documentation, etc. So the platform itself helps to facilitate that real-time update and the collaboration and capability to deliver.
Yeah, that's just outstanding. I mean, really, because if you're a creator, let's think about it. You want to bring together different component parts to make your product or well, product in particular, a reality. And to a lot of folks, that's it's a mystical thing. Like, oh, how do I even get access to that sort of thing? Trade Beyond gives you access to that entire panoply, if you will, of potential fabrics and potential component parts to build just about anything you're saying across the spectrum of what you'd find in a Target or a Walmart. Is that right?
Just about anything that you'd find in a Target or a Walmart or a Walgreens or a Petco or a PetSmart. These are some of our customers. I would stop short of saying we can't build rockets yet. We haven't figured that out. But most everything that you could find in a retailer, we could do.
That's awesome. Well, Eugene, why don't you throw some questions in here?
It sounds like, Eric, that a lot of the change, aside from the interest rate environment, which is a separate question I wanted to get into later, but it sounds like a lot of this change and demand for transparency and chain of custody is being driven by regulatory regime change, both in Europe and here. If you are running a tier one retailer, how are some of those changes in regulatory environment changing your day-to-day, where they're being driven to needing a solution like yours. They might have been working on something that was tried and true, old and rusty, and now the regulatory regime is saying, you need to show me chain of custody. You need to show me this before you can let it in the country. We won't let it in. What are some of those changes that are driving regulatory changes, that are driving technology changes?
Right. Well, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that was enacted, earlier this year by the Biden administration and put into play, is having a significant effect on imports into the United States. Specifically, you have similar legislation that's being executed in Canada. Of course, the EU is generally a step ahead of the Americas in areas such as this, and you see a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of legislation that's being put forth across the board. And it's not only about labor, it's about product quality, it's about the adherence to certain climate related activities that you have committed to. It's about the individual material makeup, the actual composites of different metals or metal related products, etc. It is demanding, and I'll tell you how it's changed our landscape. In the past, not too distant past, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, our general inquiries were coming from the merchandising side of a business. Product development, sourcing, delivery. Now our inquiries come from legal, financial, and compliance leadership.
Of course.
So it's a different set of questions. It's ultimately the same answers. The questions are posed a little differently depending on who makes the phone call, but these are some of the changes that that we're seeing, and it's not just us; it's across the board.
The Forced Labor Prevention Act is an interesting example of how the content of products, not the fixed physical content, but the kind of abstract labor content is an attribute of a product that needs to be tracked, tracked, and at every point in the supply chain, you have to know, like, did a Uyghur, a forced laborer, work on this pair of shoes? And you have to be able to tell the federal government no. And that's an important change in the way that global supply chains work.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And you've got to weigh in of what is the practical means to be able to get to that answer as a buyer or a retailer from around the world, right? And it's really a combination of people, process, and technology together. There's no one single answer, and it's posing a real challenging problem to the global retail community.
Yeah, we've gone from a nice to know to a must know kind of situation, right? Where the organizations that are delivering these products, that are selling them to the public, they have to be able to answer these questions, and the people who deliver it to them have to be able to answer those questions as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it harkens back to trust but verify, right?
Right.
Only now the lean is a lot more towards verify than it is trust.
That's interesting. And of course, you've got this environment, you have a platform that is taking information in from all these different suppliers and sources, and you are maintaining up-to-date information on the different suppliers, because someone could have a problem, and then they rectify the problem and they alert you that it's been rectified. And now it goes down the chain, if you will, such that purchasers can see, okay, that problem's been rectified. I can go back to using this supplier now. Is that about right?
Well, you're spot on. And, I can say it a little bit differently. locating and developing a relationship within your supply chain, which is made up of multiple end use locations, right? Whether it be a gin or a mill or a manufacturer or an assembly location. These all make up the chain that produces the final good. And it's very difficult as a buyer, as a retailer or brand, to be able to put together that chain that runs effectively, efficiently, that understands your ways of working, that can operate within your levels of quality, compliance, and fiscal need. And so, as such, you don't want to be changing that up all the time. And just because you might find a situation where you've conducted an inspection at a facility and it comes up with a couple of things that are, not quite right, a little out of guideline, a little out of scope. Today, it's more important for the brand or the retailer or the buyer to enter into a state of remediation. How can we help you? By investing in you in some cases, by providing you consulting, guidance, and follow-up to move through a more partnered, collaborative way of working, to engineer the challenge out of your facility or out of your labor pool or out of your general practice, as opposed to just telling you, I can't do business with you anymore. And that's what we're seeing. So, but to do that, obviously, you do need tools, generally something from a technology perspective that can help keep up and manage whether or not those activities are taking place, right?
Well,
the remediation activities.
Right. I was going to say, I mean, the key with a system of this nature and complexity is that it must be efficient. It must be modular to be able to take inputs from all these different sources and process them efficiently. If you have a sort of old school monolithic architecture, that can be very difficult to effect because it is monolithic. And so we've seen in the technology space, lots of different component parts of that enterprise software world move into this more modular, in many cases, Kubernetes enabled environment. And that is more agile. It is more wieldy. But don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, take us to the future. Indeed, yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here with Eric Linxwiler of Trade Beyond and Eugene Burke of Digital Strategies Group. And we're talking about retail. We're talking about getting the products you want when you want them. Of course, everyone knows when you go out to the store and you're with your kids maybe and they want to buy some certain thing, you're hoping that it's going to be there. Because if it's not going to be there, there's going to be some unhappy campers. And you're going to hear, I told you we should have gone yesterday. And who wants to deal with that finger waving from their child? But Eric, you folks are, of course, enabling that entire ecosystem, which I think is really fascinating and is great because it's one of these enabling technologies, right? You're allowing these suppliers to get their product to market and helping them in that entire process. And you've talked about how you help your clients really optimize the efficiency of that whole process. And this is something that's pretty deep and complex because there are many steps along the way to get that product onto the shelf in your store with the pricing and et cetera. And you help with that whole process. Can you kind of walk us through some examples of how you're able to improve profitability for your clients?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Well, the listeners need to understand that bringing a private label product to market is extremely complex. It is a complicated task. And typically, the way retailers and brands have tried to do this themselves in the past impedes or hinders their ability to scale and to deliver, mainly based on the tools that they're trying to use. They're trying to run an extremely complicated process, an extremely complicated business using fundamental tools such as spreadsheets or email or messaging boards and WeChat and WhatsApp and so forth. shared drives, and trying to stitch all of this together from multiple disparate sources. And frankly, it just doesn't work. Too many things fall through the cracks. There's gaps in the handoffs, which creates redundancies, doing the same activity over and over. At Trade Beyond, we have developed a truly end-to-end platform. We call it a extended retail supply chain and private label product platform, whereby at the very earliest stages, retailers can collaborate online, on a phone, on a website, and do initial product ideation, initial collection curation. What is my tabletop decor collection for fall of 2024 going to begin to look like? And they begin sending these messages out across the platform, and they receive back digital catalogs, digital views from potential suppliers or their supply chain partners that they already know. And they can begin to talk back and forth, keeping all the data on a single platform, and then hand it off to the next step, which is develop a detailed specification, maybe bring 1,000 items down to 50, and then move those 50 into a costing exercise, and then move the costing exercise through to sample management, evaluation, ultimately committing a purchase order to a supplier or manufacturer, and then watching all the steps along the manufacturing process of receiving the raw material, receiving the cut material, the componentry into the factory, beginning the process, getting to a final inspection, putting products into a carton, and moving it out to the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, those are so many steps. And to your point, one of my favorite expressions is well begun is half done. And the point is, if you have an ideation process that is built around faulty information or incomplete information, you're going to have some unpleasant aha moments somewhere down the line where you realize, oh no, are you kidding me? We can't get this one component part for this new set of headphones we're trying to ship. That was going to be 10% of our revenue for Q4, for example. That's the kind of conversation you want to avoid by getting people fully versed and fully vested in their available resources very early in the process, and then along the way updating you. So let's say you do get halfway through and something happens. There's a war that breaks out in a country somewhere, and that's where one of your suppliers was. All of these things can throw off a process quite significantly. But if you have a partner like Trade Beyond, which has this network and has this technology infrastructure that helps them stay on track all the way and get alerts ahead of time, so you have some time to plan to work around some of the hurdles that prop up. Is that about right?
Oh, that's exactly right. You're spot on. And oftentimes it's not even about, oh gosh, I have to go get that component for the set of headphones. Sometimes what ends up happening is I've designed the specification for a certain component. I've moved through another 2 steps in the chain, but then somebody decided, you know what, we've got a slight revision on the specification. We're going to change that component. Unfortunately, that change never gets communicated, and we move downstream with the previously decided spec. Oh. And then we've got real problems, because now we're invested, we have spent money, time, and we're beginning to put finished headphones into cartons, and we've realized we've built something we can't sell.
Right. Well, and I'm guessing that you also have your own internal scores on things, and you can manage over time which suppliers tend to be 2 to 3 days out, or if they say they're going to be 5 days, they're actually 6 days. I'm guessing you've got some intel on all that, because as you capture these details over time, that's what you want to know, is like, who is the more reliable one? Maybe one is a better price, but the other one is a little bit more time intensive. And you want to inform your clients, give them all the information that they need to make the decisions about which direction to go. And that's really the bottom line, right, Eric?
That's exactly right. I mean, it's learning how to harness the power of big data. Inside of our platform, if for one given retailer or brand, we might be managing transactions across 500, 600, 1,000 different supply chain partners, you're talking about tens of thousands of transactions, financial transactions, ordering transactions, production transactions taking place. And you're talking about moving hundreds of millions, if not trillions of dollars in spend through that same platform. So with all of this data now at your disposal inside of a single system, the retailer has the ability to analyze that information, pull out that information, look at trends, look at performance, and identify how they can iron out gaps or impediments in their overall supply chain function.
Yeah. You know, and we've seen we sometimes call it the culture wars, and I won't call out anyone in particular, but we've certainly seen boycotts in the last few years and real social uproar around this particular product or that particular ad campaign. And what you folks do comes in very handy in a situation like that. When you see something explode, if you have the capacity to research and understand and then articulate and explain the business plan to your higher ups, to your board, that's very useful to take a very calm, practical approach to dealing with what can be a very disruptive scenario out in the market. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, we have customers coming to us on a regular basis saying, how can I use the platform to assist me in a recall situation? How can I use this to get ahead of what would otherwise be you know, a misstatement potentially about my product or about how my product got to market? And by having the information, the data to fall back on, because you've created that chain of custody, you've watched the flow of the materials all the way through the production process to the carton, you have the opportunity to support your partner, your retail partner, and provide them with access to that information to tell the right story, or in some cases, you know, identify that we did have a misstep, and here's how we've identified a way to rectify that.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Eugene, go ahead.
So I'm familiar with things like chain of custody, cold chain, those kinds of things in food and in pharma. So I'm familiar with those concepts. How the kind of compliance mandates that have been put on tier one retailers probably would surprise people. What are a couple of the mandates that this kind of modular end-to-end platform supports, that people would be surprised that this product that you went to get at Walgreens has to have a certificate of X that says that it complies with regulation Y, and you have to have full transparency in the entire supply chain?
Yeah, well, people would be surprised to know that at the earliest stages, a retailer could be asked at any given time to document the origin to the block and the lot level of cotton that is in this shirt that I'm wearing.
Wow.
right here today.
Wow.
And it's not only, well, can I identify where the actual cotton came from and what was the bale, where did it get baled, but where did that bale travel to be ginned, and then from there, where did it go to become yarn, and where did the yarn go to become rolls of flat material? Where was that material dyed? Can I get view on the water that was used, the amount of water, and what is being done to reclaim or treat the water, and how is it getting back into the environment? All of this has to be produced by a retailer that may place an order in Munich, Germany, and is dealing with a supply chain that is predominantly Asian, but happens to be in 4 different Asian countries.
Right.
This is not an easy task. And we can take it a step further. It's not just about the origin of the product. You also see now that we have retailers, large-scale retailers and brands signing up globally around the world to meet certain science-based target initiatives around Scope 3 carbon emissions. And we have to identify in our supply chain and be able to show where the key contributors are in our manufacturing process as a retailer or a brand, and how we're helping to collaborate and assist those contributors in reducing their outputs that are directly related to the production of my goods. So it's a complex challenge, and one that doesn't have an easy answer, but certainly one that we're working to help meet.
Yeah. And do you also provide consultancy services for your clients? In other words, getting into the weeds with them and sharing some data perhaps that you've seen of trends in certain products or certain suppliers, for example. Is there a consultative aspect to your service offering as well?
Well, we at Trade Beyond, we partner with experts, domain experts in these various consultancies of knowledge. We do not house that as part of our practice. We do, however, on a global basis, provide all of the technical, deployment, implementation, best practice suggestion, and change management process for implementing a digital solution into the retailer's and supply chain process. But we do not actually provide consultancy, for example, around scope 3.
No, that's interesting, but you do have all these partners. And so that's who you want to look to, is who is an expert consultant in this particular kind of retail product or that particular kind of retail product. I mean, you said you're not doing rockets yet, but certainly in the computers and phones and all these other things, the chips are a big issue. Taiwan, of course, is the primary place that many of these advanced chips are developed, but I know that Vietnam is working on them. FPT told us about that just last week. So staying abreast of who's manufacturing what and at which price point, that's a huge, huge part of the challenge of being able to know what you could work on, what you could possibly spec out. And the sooner you know that in that life cycle, the better, right, Eric?
Oh yeah, no, you're exactly right. The sourcing of new geographies, new innovative suppliers that are out on the leading edge of different manufacturing technique, are out on the edge of meeting more stringent compliance as it relates to raw material protection and management, or chemicals, etc. It's vital that we stay a step ahead. And so our collaboration tools, our reach out tools, our supply chain search capabilities help to do the discovery. But then, as important, if I identify potentially a new member that I'd like to bring into my community, my supply chain community, we then help with the critical path of the onboarding process, the vetting process, the analysis process of bringing that supply chain partner into the fold.
Yeah, and these are all critical components to what is an end-to-end process that, as we've suggested, is very complex. But if you can break it down and offer guidance, offer support, offer collaborative ability to the individual component steps, if you will, along the way, that's the key. And you take your time, but you want to know that you're investing your time responsibly and efficiently. And that's where these early indicators come from, to let you know this product or this particular type of linen, for example, is now in jeopardy. Maybe there's a fire. There have been fires at these warehouses around the world. The sooner you can get these alerts that then travel through the system, the better off everyone's going to be. And that keeps all the trains running on time. It keeps all the kids happy with their Halloween outfits. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome back to Inside Analysis. Having a fantastic conversation today with Eric Linxwiler from Trade Beyond, and of course, Eugene Burke from Digital Strategies Group. And we're talking about supply chains. We got to get the stuff we want when we want it. And we really want to help the suppliers optimize that whole process end to end, from ideation to sourcing to design to production to distribution, the whole kit and caboodle. There are lots of areas along that process where things can falter, where things can kind of get difficult. And we're trying to improve all that while also being good citizens of Earth here. And Eric, you talked about these sustainability platforms. I'm reminded another cliche: when you know better, you do better. When people are informed that, oh, this product is maybe created in a place where the workers are not treated very well at all, a lot of people do want to honor that. A lot of people are willing to pay a little bit more to not go down that road. But tell us a bit about these sustainability platforms and how folks can learn about them.
Yeah, glad you brought that up, Eric. This is becoming a very popular topic, high level of compatibility across multiple platforms that serve a community of the subcommunity of the supply chain partners that make up the overall supply chain for a given retailer or brand, the folks that we typically serve, right? So for example, we have a challenge in our business called audit fatigue, and that is the same brand, two DIY retailers that are using essentially the same supply chain, almost 60 or 70%, to manufacture the like or very similar products. And they are going in and doing investigations and studies and questionnaires independently, but within days or a week or two of each other, putting the supply chain partner at a point of almost breaking, having to do the same work over and over just to justify their ability to be able to accept and deliver an order. So what we're seeing now are various platforms. WRAP comes to mind, WRAP, Amfori with BSCI certification comes to mind, SLCP, Worldly with the Higg Index in conjunction with SAC, the Sustainability Apparel Coalition, and others that are giving access to a large pool of standard of supply chain members, factories, mills, gins, etc., that have gone through a standardized questionnaire, audit, evaluation, attestation. And the retailers can then use that one single certification to justify doing business with that partner, as opposed to asking that partner to do the same investigation, have the same audit, the same questionnaire done over and over and over again by themselves as well as their competitors. So this is really helping to move the supply chain along, trying to engineer out a lot of the effort that the partners have to go through to stay operational. And we see other areas. We see sustainability platforms around environment, around climate, around usage of material. And we're seeing more and more that our customers, tier one retailers and brands, are willing to open up and engage in a shareable information community. And I think it just looks forward to a very bright future for where we're going to go as the world tends to get smaller and smaller as it relates to merchandise and merchandise manufacturing.
Yeah, that's great news. And, I'm a huge fan of transparency, and the more you share with others, the more they understand about what you do and what's available. It greases the tracks to innovation, I guess, is one way I would look at it. And, for entrepreneurs, if you want to get something rocking and rolling, what you want is as few hurdles as possible. And folks seem to be solving for many of the potential hurdles just by providing this platform and sharing it with your partners and getting not just these big box retailers, but getting the whole community of providers in the mix, right, Eric?
Well, I mean, that's our focus. At Trade Beyond, we profess to be innovators and aggressive innovators from a technology perspective, but we also manage to a sense of humility, to doing what is right for the largest number of folks, to treating all of our customers to the extent of giving them the advantages, that we learn out in the field from a best practice perspective. And as such, we try to bring that message to market as well. And these are some of the things that I propose. It's not always about speeding down the road and constantly looking in your rear view mirror to see if you're being chased by a police officer, right? Sometimes it's about just not speeding and doing the right thing. and that's really what we encourage. And then spreading that right thing, spreading what you learn throughout the entire global retail environment, retail community.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, getting back to the transparency, it's amazing how these new technologies are changing consumer expectations. Think about what Uber did with a taxi service. The fact that you can see where that car is going around the corner heading to you, that's incredibly useful for the end user, for the consumer. Because back in the day with taxis, like, is the taxi going to be here? Is it not going to be here? I don't even know. I got to get to the airport. I mean, I remember trying, because a friend of mine spent like $50,000 to get a medallion to do a taxi in New Orleans, like 2 years before Uber came out. He just dropped all this money, and now all of a sudden, boom, he's got this huge competition. I tried to help them out by calling Yellow Cab, and like they wouldn't even answer the phone. So I'm like, all right, like I got to get to the airport. I want to help you out, buddy, but geez. And I think you're doing that now for this whole world of retail, everything from ideation through sourcing and design and production, et cetera. You are providing that Uber-like capability because you have information and you can share that information. And when information is shared, guess what? People collaborate. When information is not shared, people collaborate less. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you stated, I think I heard you say, you know, we're working to give people the ability to see around corners, for sure, to be able to understand what's going on upstream, way upstream, as well as downstream in their day-to-day activity as they're trying to bring new product to market. We're, of course, doing it where we can with digital tools. We're looking, we also don't necessarily profess to have all the answers inside of our existing platforms. I think you see over one of my shoulders here, we just made an acquisition of a company, Pivot 88, because of their significant advances in actual material traceability. So being able to see farther upstream all of the individual components, fiber, et cetera, that makes up a given roll of material. So traceability, transparency, being able to see that ahead of time before placing the order for it, as an example, really speeds things along. So yeah, all areas, traceability and transparency is what we try to aim for.
That makes a lot of sense. And closing thoughts here, Eugene. I know that I'm going to be happy because I'll be able to get the products and objects that my family craves. And that's really what it boils down to, right? Is having visibility. But I'm also excited for the entrepreneurs and for the producers to be able to get in and get the benefit of all that visibility to see around the corners. That's the key, right, Eugene? Especially these days, because things change quickly. They can change rather severely, and that can be very impactful in negative ways. But if you can see around corners, at least you can prepare. Final thoughts from you, Eugene.
It's really interesting, the capabilities of the ever-evolving globally integrated value chain, that there's no end to what the regulatory compliance regime will insist that you know about the products that you're sourcing. And that's a really interesting business to be in. And it looks like the foundation that you're building with the acquisition of Pivot 88 is going to position you well in that part of the market as well.
Yeah, 60 seconds. Any closing thoughts from you, Eric?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for letting me tell our story to begin to, to help educate your listeners and your viewers. So thank you for that, both Eugene and Eric. And more importantly, I want to say thank you to all of the members of our entire ecosystem, both customers of mine and non-customers of mine, that are beginning to work more closely together in developing and delivering on a more effective, efficient, open, and clean environment.
I love it. Well, folks, look these guys up online, tradebeyond.com. We've been talking to Eric Linxwiler, Senior Vice President over there. And we all want cool stuff. We all want cool stuff, but we want to be efficient. We want to be responsible. And you got to leverage partners. You got to work with partners to get all that stuff done, because you're not going to be able to tackle the regulatory stuff by yourself. Or even if you can, do you really want to spend your time and effort on that sort of process? Probably not. Anyway, send me an email if you want to be in the show, info@InsideAnalysis.com. We'll talk to you next time. Okay, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on a very fascinating show. I mean, I thought Eric Linxwiler was fantastic. He really understands a very complex industry. And I love their focus of enabling the ecosystem, because that's really what they're doing. There are all these different steps to traverse. And if you're trying to do things the old-fashioned manual way, boy, you're just going to have a really hard time cracking that nut. And to our conversation, we talked about regulation, and they also kind of hinted there after the show, after they left, was about consumer preference. And that's a huge issue these days. You need to pay attention to what the consumers want, because if they tell you they don't want something, you better stop making it, or you're going to get some very unpleasant financial news in the near future. But Eugene, you have a whole history in supply chain, and you know quite a bit about it. You must have seen it and appreciated that things are changing, and they're probably not going to change back. What do you think?
I think that an important thing to realize about their positioning and the value that they're offering, we were talking about the ecosystem and the ability to see around corners, those are interesting metaphors. But supply chain is now so much more than just physical logistics. So yes, the interest rate environment has changed. That impacts some kinds of logistics, the financial impact for some kinds of logistics chains, but the supply chain software market and the technology is now, and has to be, so much more than just moving goods from stock to dock, dock to stock. It's so much more than physical logistics. A couple of things that Eric was talking about is understanding what kind of cotton goes into a particular shirt, whether a particular product was made with forced labor. Right. Those kinds of, and then the RAP score and the ESG score, those are important aspects of product quality that tier one retailers, that's a value that they're positioning and selling to their customers.
Yeah.
So, and that's much more than physical logistics. It's much more.
You commented on that with a great quote at the end of the show there, at the end of the regulation version, if you will, of the show before the podcast bonus, about the extended value chain and how there are all these steps along the way where partners and other organizations can bring some value, maybe in the form of expertise, oftentimes in the form of data, just getting the right data plugged in. And he talked about different kinds of cotton. I mean, I know that there are certain kinds of cotton that my kid likes to wear, and there's certain kinds that she doesn't like to wear. And having the transparency and the visibility into where that can be found, that's interesting stuff. Now and I really like the discovery part of their platform too, because when you're ideating, when you're trying to figure out what to make, and you have to guess at what the consumers are going to want, it really helps to have as much information as possible about the recipe, what went into this, who went into this. All that stuff really, I think, helps create a much more compelling storyline about being able to bring new products to market and get them in the stores. What do you think?
And every step along the way requires collaboration and oodles of data. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me is the way that it's being done or had been done is WhatsApp, spreadsheet, emails, right? And then all of those places where important information can and does fall through the cracks, and all of a sudden an auditor comes and says, prove to me that this product, you have chain of custody and you know exactly where it came from. Yeah. That there's value in having that data, and you're sourcing from an ecosystem. And so from the perspective of the merchandiser, you have much better command over all of the aspects of product quality as you're fielding and merchandising a product. Mm-hmm. And that has to give them a lot of comfort that they have transparency, visibility, and they have command over a much broader set of attributes of their supply chain.
Yeah. Well, and as the enabling technology, as the enabling platform, they are the rising tide that can lift all boats. I mean, that's the beautiful thing of an approach like that, is as the enabling technology, as the platform, you can improve the platform with more data, with more partners, with more efficient processes, and that all helps everyone involved. And that's what you want to see when the ecosystem gets empowered with more data, with more efficiency, and with more insights. Final
Right.
thoughts.
The value of the network, right, is in direct proportion to the number of its nodes. Right.
Yeah.
And so as they're building, especially when supply chains get much, much, much more globally complex and politically complex, having a network from a merchandiser's perspective should give you a lot of comfort that you understand where your products are coming from, how they're going to get to market, and how you're going to be able to meet customer demand.
Good stuff, folks. We'll check them up online. I thought that was an absolutely fantastic show. Send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.